"Mom, apologize to my wife or get out of my house." Those were the exact words that came out of my son Daniel's mouth that Wednesday night, in front of the dining room table I had paid for, in the house I had helped him buy, while my granddaughter slept 3 rooms away in a crib I had assembled with my own hands. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not collapse the way they expected me to collapse. I stood up slowly from my chair, set down the cloth napkin I had been folding in my lap, and looked directly at the woman sitting across from me. The woman who had spent the last 2 years smiling at me with that careful, practiced smile, while she emptied my accounts one quiet transfer at a time. By the end of this story, I'm also going to share something special with those of you who stick around to the end, something that can help you in your personal life. But first, let's get back to. I said 3 words to her. Just 3. And then I picked up my purse and walked out the door. 12 days later, my son was on his knees on my porch in the rain, begging me to open the door. But that part comes later. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I am 63 years old, and what I am about to tell you cost me my son for a season, and gave me back something I had not known I had lost. Myself. I do not know if I made the right choice that night. There are still mornings when the fog comes in low over Bellingham Bay and the house is so quiet I can hear the kettle ticking on the stove, and I ask myself if I was too hard, if I was too proud, if I should have just said the words she wanted to hear and let things go on the way they had been going. But then I remember her smile across that table. The way she watched me, like a woman watching a clock she had wound herself, waiting for the hour to strike. And I know. There are moments in a woman's life when she has to choose between being loved and being respected. And once you understand that those 2 things are not always the same, you can never go back to pretending they are. It started 3 years ago, on a wet October morning, when my husband Theodore picked up his coffee cup and never finished drinking from it. Aneurysm. 66 years old. The doctor at St. Joseph's told me it was the kind of thing that gives no warning, the kind of thing you cannot prepare for, the kind of thing that takes a man from his kitchen table at 7 in the morning and delivers him to a sterile hospital corridor by 8, no longer a man, only a body under a sheet that someone is asking me to identify. Theo. My Theo. He was a funeral director. Whitfield Memorial Services. 3 locations across Northwest Washington State. Bellingham, Mount Vernon, and Anacortes. He built it from one rented chapel in 1986 to a name that grieving families in 3 counties trusted with their dead. And he did it with calloused, careful hands and a way of speaking softly that made people feel like their loss was the only loss in the world. I kept the locket he gave me on our wedding day in the top drawer of my vanity, a small oval thing of brushed silver on a thin chain, with his picture inside from the morning he signed the lease on the first chapel. He was 26 in that photograph, lean as a fence post, holding a key in his palm like it was a baby bird. On the opposite side of the locket, I had folded in a tiny strip from our wedding program. His name beside mine. Theodore and Eleanor. April 1981. I still take it out, sometimes, when I need to remember who I was before I became the invisible woman of this story. Because for a long time, that is what I became. Invisible. Quietly, politely, day by day, room by room, until even my own son could look past me at the dinner table and not see me at all. Have you ever felt that? That slow erasure. That sense of becoming furniture in the life of someone you would have died for. If you have, write your city in the comments. I want to know where you are tonight. I want to know I am not the only one who walked through that hallway in the dark, reaching for a hand that was no longer in the bed beside her. Theo and I met in the spring of 1980. I was 23, working as a bookkeeper for a small dairy cooperative outside Linden. He came in to pick up an invoice for his uncle's farm, and he stood in the doorway with his coat dripping on the linoleum, and he asked me if I knew where a man could find a decent cup of coffee in this town. I told him that depended on what he meant by decent. He had a slow smile, the kind that came up one corner at a time, and he said he meant coffee that tasted like coffee, and a chair that did not wobble, and a woman who was not afraid to tell him if the pie was any good. I sent him to a diner on the highway. He was there the next afternoon at 5 o'clock when I locked up, leaning against a green pickup truck, hands in his pockets, rain in his hair. "I tried the pie," he said. "It was not good. I warned you." "You did. So I came back to ask if you might know somewhere better." We were married 11 months later in a small Lutheran church on the edge of town. I wore my mother's dress, taken in at the waist. He cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. He took my hands at the altar and said, "I am going to take care of you. All the days I have, Eleanor. All of them." And he did. For 41 years, he did. We lived first in a one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store in Ferndale, with a radiator that banged like a drum. I read on the fire escape in the summer. He brought me peaches from the Saturday market wrapped in newspaper. We argued about the dishes and made up in the kitchen with our hands floury from kneading bread, and we built the small architecture of a marriage one quiet evening at a time. Theo had grown up working in his uncle's funeral home. He had a feeling for it, the way some men have a feeling for horses or engines. He understood that grief was not something to manage but something to walk beside. When he told me he wanted to open his own chapel, I sold the gold bracelet my grandmother left me, and we put the money in an envelope with everything we had saved, and we drove to the bank together. The man behind the desk looked at us, and at our envelope, and at our wedding rings, and he said, "Mr. Whitfield, do you understand how thin a margin a funeral home runs on?" Theo said, "I understand grief, sir. The margin is the rest of my education." The man laughed and signed the loan. Whitfield Memorial Services opened its first chapel in the spring of 1986. I painted the trim myself. I sewed the dove gray curtains from a bolt of clearance fabric. I answered the phones for the first 2 years and sat with widows in the front parlor and made them tea, while Theo went into the back room to do the work I never asked him to describe. Daniel was born in November of 1988. Long labor. 20 hours. Theo did not leave my side. When the nurse put our son on my chest, Theo leaned down and kissed the boy's forehead. "Hello, Daniel. Your father has been waiting for you a long time." Daniel was a watchful baby. He had Theo's deep brown eyes and my stubborn chin. Theo took him to the chapel on weekends, sat him on the polished counter and taught him the names of the flowers in the cooler. White lily. Yellow chrysanthemum. The deep red carnation that the older Italian families in Anacortes always requested. "This is sacred work, son," Theo told him once, when Daniel was maybe 7. "We do not get to choose who comes through our door. But we choose how we send them home." Daniel looked up at him with those big serious eyes and nodded as though he understood. And I thought, my God, this boy is going to be his father. How wrong I was. How wrong a mother can be about her own son. By the time Daniel was 12, the second chapel had opened. By the time he was 16, the third. We bought the house on Edgewood Drive when he was 14. 3 stories of cedar shake and white trim, a wraparound porch that looked out over the bay. The day we moved in, Theo carried me across the threshold even though my knees were already starting to bother me, and he set me down in the front hallway and said, "This is the last house we will ever live in, Elle. This is where we get old." I believed him. I let myself believe him. Daniel went to Western Washington University and studied business. He worked summers at the chapel during college, but he did not love it the way Theo had hoped. He told me once, when he was 20, that the smell of the prep room gave him bad dreams. I told him he did not have to do it. That his father had not become a funeral director because he was told to. That was not the only way to be a good man. He hugged me when I said that. He held on a long time. I think about that hug sometimes, now. I think about whether I gave him too much permission to walk away from his father's work. Whether I should have made him stay closer to that smell, that quiet, that lesson. But you cannot raise children twice. After college, Daniel took a job with a logistics company in Seattle. Regional manager by 30. He bought a condo in Ballard. He came home for Christmas and Easter and a long weekend in August, and we talked on the phone every Sunday. Theo had a harder time with it. Not bitter, never bitter. But quieter. He would stand at the window of the front parlor in the Bellingham Chapel sometimes, looking out at the parking lot. He has his own life now, Theo, I said one evening. I know, Elle. I just always thought one of us would still be here when I had to close the door for the last time. To turn off the lights. You will have me. He turned and smiled at me. That same slow smile. I will always have you. He died 8 months later. Wednesday morning. October 14, 2022. He had been complaining of a headache for 2 days. He took aspirin. He went to work. He came home at 6, kissed me on the temple, said he was going to lie down before dinner. He never got up. I found him at 6:45, lying on top of the bedspread still in his work clothes, his shoes off but his socks still on, one hand resting on his chest as though he had been about to undo a button. I knew before I touched him. There is a quality to a body that is no longer a body. I sat down on the bed next to him. I picked up his hand, which was already cooling. And I said, "Oh, Theo. Oh, my love." I called 911. I called the chapel. I called Daniel last. He picked up on the second ring. Mom? Honey. Your father. I could not finish the sentence. I did not have to. He was on a plane within 2 hours. He arrived at the house just before midnight, and he came up the front walk in the cold and the dark, and he stopped on the porch and looked at me through the screen door, and he was 12 years old again. My boy. He fell into my arms and we both cried. I have got you, Mom, he whispered. I have got you. I am going to take care of you, just like Dad took care of you. I promise. I believed him. How could I not believe him? The funeral was at the Bellingham Chapel. 300 people, easily. Families he had served, people whose mothers or fathers or children he had buried. I sat in the front pew with Daniel on my left, and I held the silver locket in my right hand the entire service. I did not cry. Theo had once told me that the dignity of grief belongs to the bereaved, and that it is no one else's business how you grieve or when. So I held my dignity in my closed fist and I let the others cry around me, and I thought about Theo's hands, and the way he used to peel apples in one long unbroken curl. That night, when everyone had gone home, when Daniel was asleep in his old bedroom upstairs, I went into the closet and I took down one of Theo's shirts. The dove gray one. The one he wore to the chapel on his last day. It still smelled of him. I sat down on the floor of the closet, and I held that shirt against my face, and I finally cried. I cried for 3 hours. Long, deep, ugly cries that came out of me in a way I had not known I could cry. Daniel slept the dead sleep of a man who had flown across the country on a day his father died, and I was grateful for that, because grief that big needs to be private. If you have ever sat in a closet at midnight holding a dead man's shirt, tell me in the comments. Tell me your name and your city. I want to know who else has been there. The first 6 months without Theo were a fog. Everything moved slow. Sounds came muffled. I existed, but I did not live. I got up at 6 every morning because Theo always got up at 6 and I did not know how to wake up at any other time. I made coffee for one. I ate toast standing at the counter. 3 months after the funeral, Theo's attorney called me. Wendell Calloway. A man Theo had known for 30 years. He asked me to come into his office on State Street to go over the estate. I sat across from him at a desk that smelled of pipe tobacco, my hands folded in my lap, and he opened a folder thicker than my forearm. Eleanor, he said, taking off his reading glasses, Theodore was a careful man. You know that. He was even more careful than I think you realized. You are the sole heir. Everything. The house. The 3 chapels. The land in Anacortes that we bought as an investment in 2011, which has appreciated considerably. The equipment, the vehicles, the brand. The accounts. The retirement funds. In total, after debts and taxes, you are looking at an estate of approximately $2.4 million, with annual revenue from the chapels running close to $400,000 a year. I did not say anything. I was not prepared for the number. Theo and I had lived carefully. We drove the same 2 cars for 10 years. We took 1 vacation a year to the same cabin on Lake Whatcom. I had no idea what the business was actually worth. There is something else, Calloway said. Something Theodore was very specific about. He structured this estate so that everything passes to you, and only to you, while you are alive. Daniel does not inherit until after your death. You have full and complete control of every asset. You can sell, buy, give, withhold, however you see fit. Daniel is named as the beneficiary on your death, but the structure of the trust prevents him from accessing any of it during your lifetime, regardless of any document you might sign in the future. There are protection clauses. Several of them. They are unusual, and they are designed to be very, very difficult to undo. Why? Why would Theo do that? Calloway hesitated. Eleanor, your husband was a man who watched grief enter the lives of 200 or 300 families a year. He saw what money does to people. He saw what bereavement does to people. He told me, more than once, that the worst thing a parent can do is leave their child an inheritance the child has not yet earned the right to receive. He said, and I am quoting him almost exactly, "I will not let my son turn into a man my wife has to be afraid of." I felt a coldness in my chest. Theo said that? He said that. About 4 years ago. I asked him then if he was concerned about something specific, and he told me no, that Daniel was a good boy, but that he wanted you protected. From everyone. Even from your own grief. Even from yourself. I left Calloway's office that afternoon with the folder in my arms and the silver locket warm against my collarbone, and I sat in the driver's seat of my car for almost half an hour before I trusted my hands enough to drive. Theo had known something. He had known something I did not know. I called Daniel that evening and told him about the meeting. "That is great, Mom," he said. "Dad always had everything figured out. So you are taken care of. And when, eventually, all that comes to me, right?" Eventually. There was a pause on his end. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. But I heard something in that pause that did not belong there. A consideration. A calculation. "I just mean, when the time comes, of course," he said quickly. "I am not, I just want to make sure you are taken care of, Mom." "Of course, honey." We hung up shortly after. I sat in the front parlor with the phone still in my hand, looking out the window at the cedar tree Theo had planted the year Daniel was born, and I felt, for the first time, a very small crack form in the picture I had of my son. But I closed my eyes against it. Because that is what a mother does. She closes her eyes. 8 months after Theo's funeral, Daniel called me on a Sunday evening with that particular cheerfulness in his voice that mothers learn to recognize as a precursor to news. "Mom. I want you to meet someone. Her name is Brielle. She is 28. I met her at a conference in Portland 6 weeks ago. Mom, she is amazing. She is the smartest woman I have ever known." I asked the questions a mother asks. Where she grew up. What her family did. Whether she had been married before. He told me she was from outside Tacoma, that her parents were both pharmacists, that no, she had never been married, and that she could not wait to meet me. Bring her to the house, then. Sunday after next. I will make lamb. They arrived an hour late, with no phone call. I watched them come up the walkway from the kitchen window. Daniel first, in a jacket I did not recognize. Behind him, a young woman in a cream-colored coat and tall boots, with hair the color of dark honey pulled back into a low knot, and a face that was beautiful in the way certain magazine covers are beautiful. Symmetrical. Polished. Without quite enough warmth. She did not look at the house. She looked at the cars in the driveway. Mine, an old Volvo. Daniel's rental, a black SUV. She paused in front of my Volvo for just a second too long. Then she smiled, and she put her arm through Daniel's, and she walked the rest of the way to the door. I opened it. I smiled. I said, "You must be Brielle. Welcome." She extended a hand. She did not hug me. Her grip was cool and brief. "Mrs. Whitfield. It is lovely to finally meet you. Daniel has told me so much. Such a quaint house. So much character." The word quaint sat in my chest like a small splinter. I have lived in this house for 30 years. The cedar shakes on the south side were replaced by my own hands during a contractor strike in 1999. But I smiled. Because what else does a mother do? She walked through the rooms of my house the way a person walks through a real estate listing, her eyes touching every object, every surface, every piece of furniture. Daniel followed behind her like a man in awe, and I had not seen him look at anyone that way before, and something in me sank quietly toward the floor. At lunch, she held her hand over her wine glass. "I do not drink anymore. It is not aligned with my health goals." "Daniel, you should not drink either. You know what we agreed." He flushed. He put his glass down without taking a sip. Then she asked, in a tone of careful concern, "And how are you managing, Mrs. Whitfield?" Daniel says the business was quite a complicated estate. It must be overwhelming. It is being managed. The staff is excellent. Oh, of course. I just mean, eventually one starts to think about simplification. A house this big. The properties. It must be a lot to handle on your own. Have you thought about consolidation? Consolidation. Just streamlining things. Daniel and I were talking about it on the drive up. There is a lot of wisdom in transferring assets while you are still healthy enough to make those decisions clearly. It saves so much pain down the road. I set down my fork. Slowly. I looked at my son. He was looking at his plate. "I have an attorney for those questions, Brielle. He is taking very good care of me." "Oh, of course. I am sure he is. In pharma, I see a lot of older clients, and the ones who suffer the most are the ones who wait too long. I just want you to be informed." She smiled. She picked up her water glass. After they left, after I had stood on the porch and waved as Daniel backed the SUV out of the driveway, I went back inside and I closed the door, and I leaned against it, and I stood there for a long time. Then I went to the vanity. I took out the locket. I opened it. I do not like her, Theo. I do not like her for our boy. I told myself I would give her a chance. I gave her a chance for the next 2 years. And every chance I gave her was a thread she pulled out of me, one at a time, until I was a coat with no lining. Brielle and Daniel were engaged 4 months after that first lunch. A week later, she called me directly for the first time. "Mrs. Whitfield. It is Brielle. Daniel and I have been looking at venues, and we found the most beautiful place. The Raven's Roost Estate, up on Chuckanut Drive. We were hoping you might consider helping us with the venue. $80,000 for the venue and catering." Brielle. "That is a great deal of money." "I know it is. But Mrs. Whitfield, a wedding only happens once. And Daniel deserves it. He has worked so hard. And honestly, you have everything Theodore left you, and Daniel is going to inherit it all anyway, isn't he? So what difference does it really make?" There it was. That phrase. He is going to inherit it all anyway, isn't he? The one I would hear from her in a dozen variations in the years to come. I transferred $80,000 to him on Friday morning. I told myself it bought me a place at the table. I told myself I had earned the right to be near my son and his new wife for the rest of their lives. How naive I was. How naive a woman can be when she is afraid of being alone. The wedding was in June, on a hill overlooking the water. Brielle wore a dress that must have cost as much as a used car. She was beautiful. Cold and beautiful, the way certain mountain lakes are beautiful. The kind of beauty you admire from a distance but do not put your hand into. I wore the navy blue dress I had worn to my niece's wedding 3 years before. Brielle saw me at the bridal suite and frowned. "Mrs. Whitfield. Is that what you are wearing?" "It is." "Oh. I just thought. I sent you the link to that boutique in Seattle, did you not see it? I had thought you would pick something more current." "This is what I am wearing, Brielle." At the reception, I was seated at a table in the back corner, with 2 of Brielle's distant uncles from California who barely acknowledged me. The main table at the front held the bride and groom, the bridal party, and Brielle's parents. The 2 pharmacists. They sat in the place where Theo should have been sitting, and they did not come back to my table to introduce themselves until almost 10 o'clock at night, after the cake had been cut. I left before the dancing. I drove home alone in the dark on Chuckanut Drive, with the headlights cutting through the fog, and I thought about Theo, and I thought about how a wedding can be a small holy thing or it can be a stage set built by a stranger, and which kind of woman a man marries tells you almost everything you need to know. A month after the wedding, Daniel called to tell me they had found a house. A new build in Sammamish, east of Seattle. 5 bedrooms. A view of the lake. "Mom, we are in love with it. But the down payment is $150,000. We can swing the mortgage with both our incomes, but the down payment is just out of reach." "Daniel, I gave you $80,000 for the wedding 3 months ago." "I know, Mom. But this is different. This is the house where Brielle and I are going to raise our children. Your grandchildren. This is your legacy as much as it is ours. Your grandchildren." The word he used to open the lock he could not pick with anything else. I transferred the $150,000. I helped them move in. I carried boxes from a U-Haul up a flight of stairs at 61 years old. I was in the kitchen, putting plates into a cabinet, when I heard Brielle's voice from the next room. "Daniel, sweetheart. Is your mother going to be coming around a lot? Just so I know how to plan." "She is my mom, Brielle." "Of course she is. I know she is, honey. I just mean, mothers-in-law can be such a presence. Once they get used to coming over, they start to feel entitled to come over. I just want us to establish good boundaries from the start. For our marriage." I waited for Daniel to defend me. To say that his mother had just given them $150,000 and that she was welcome whenever she wanted to be there. He did not say it. "You are right. We should set expectations early." I stood in that kitchen with a stack of plates in my hands, and I could not breathe. I put the plates down. I went into the dining room. I smiled. I told them I had a headache and needed to get back to Bellingham before traffic. I drove home in the rain. I did not put on the radio. When I got home I went straight upstairs to the vanity and I took out the locket and I sat on the edge of the bed and I cried for the first time in months. Theo. I am losing him. I am losing our boy. The next 18 months were a slow erasure. Dinner once a month. I drove the 2 hours to Sammamish. I brought a homemade pie or a casserole that Brielle thanked me for politely and put directly into the refrigerator without serving. She tracked Daniel's calories. She would put his plate together for him at dinner, in measured portions. He never resisted. He laughed at her jokes a beat after she laughed at her own jokes. He answered her questions before he answered mine. I watched my son disappear into her. It was not loud. It was a slow dissolution, like sugar and water. In the 2nd year of their marriage, she got pregnant. Daniel called me on a Sunday morning in March, his voice raw with joy. Mom. Brielle is pregnant. You are going to be a grandmother. Ivy was born in November of 2024. 7 pounds 2 ounces. Brielle's mother flew in from Tacoma and stayed for 3 weeks. I was told I should not come until they were more settled. I sent flowers. I sent a hand-knit blanket I had made over the previous 5 months. I did not meet my granddaughter until she was 6 weeks old. When I finally drove down to Sammamish in mid-December, Brielle answered the door holding the baby, and she did not let me hold her. She just fell asleep. Could you take your shoes off, please? We tried to keep the floors clean for her. I padded across the living room in stockinged feet. I looked down at the small sleeping face of my granddaughter, and I felt the kind of love that knocks the air out of you. Can I hold her? She is sleeping, Mrs. Whitfield. If we wake her now, the whole nap schedule is ruined. I sat on the couch. 20 minutes later, Brielle suggested I should probably get on the road before traffic got bad on I-5. I drove home. I did not cry that night. Something had hardened in me, slowly, without my permission. Over the next 8 months, I saw Ivy 4 times. 4 times. Total. For my own granddaughter. Each visit lasted under an hour. Each visit was scheduled around Brielle's calendar, Brielle's mood, Brielle's nap rules. I was permitted to hold the baby once, for 9 minutes, on a Sunday afternoon in April, while Brielle stood in the doorway timing the visit on her phone. I called Daniel one evening. I told him I felt I was being shut out. Mom, you are not being shut out. Brielle is just very particular. She has read all the research. You have to give her grace. I have given her grace, Daniel. I have given her 2 years of grace and $230,000 of grace. I would like to hold my granddaughter. There was a long silence on the line. I will talk to her, Mom. He did not talk to her. Or if he did, the conversation did not change anything. While I tell you this, I wonder if you have lived something similar. Have you ever felt that you erase yourself to keep the peace? Write it in the comments. Sometimes just knowing we are not alone gives us strength to continue. In May of last year, Daniel called me with that formal, rehearsed tone. Mom. I want to talk to you about something Brielle and I have been thinking about. We have been talking to a financial advisor. He thinks we should consolidate. He thinks it makes sense to put the Bellingham house, and ideally one of the chapels too, in my name now. While you are still healthy. While we can avoid probate. He says it is the smart, modern way to handle a family estate of this size. In your name. Yes. While you are still living in the house. While you are still running the business. It is just a paper change. A legal optimization. Daniel. Your father set up the estate the way he set it up for a reason. Mom, Dad set it up in 2018. The tax laws have changed. He could not have anticipated everything. He anticipated quite a lot, actually. There was a small silence. A cold one. Mom. I am asking you, as your son, to at least consider it. For me. For Ivy. For your granddaughter's future. I will think about it. We hung up. The cedar tree out the window was thick with new needles. Theo had said it. Years before he died. I will not let my son turn into a man my wife has to be afraid of. I went to see Calloway the next morning. I did not tell Daniel I was going. Calloway was older now, his beard fully white, but his eyes were just as sharp as they had been 3 years before. He listened to me without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and folded his hands. Eleanor. Do not do this. He says it is a smart legal move. It is not. It is the dumbest move a widow in your position could make. The minute you transfer that house into your son's name, you have no legal claim to it. He could sell it. He could mortgage it. He could declare bankruptcy and have it seized by his creditors. He could divorce his wife and split the asset with her in a settlement, and you would have no say. Daniel would not do those things. Calloway looked at me with the kind of patience an old country lawyer reserves for women who do not yet know what they are about to learn. Eleanor. The estate is not your son's yet because Theodore did not want it to be. Theodore was the best judge of human character I knew in 50 years of practice. He saw something in your son, or he saw something coming toward your son, and he built you a wall. Do not pull down that wall because someone you love is asking you to. That is the whole point of a wall. It only works if you do not pull it down. He showed me, again, the structure of the trusts. There were protection clauses I had not even known existed. One allowed me to activate an irrevocable freeze on the entire estate the moment I felt I was being coerced. Once activated, even I could not undo it. Theodore wrote that clause himself, Calloway said. Word for word. He told me he wanted to give you a button you could press, in case the day ever came when you needed to. I went home. I did not call Daniel back for 3 days. When I did, I told him gently that I had thought about it carefully and that I was going to keep things the way Theo had structured them. The temperature of his voice dropped 20 degrees. Mom. I really wish you would reconsider. I have considered, Daniel. The answer is no. This is going to hurt the family. The family is not hurt by a house, Daniel. The family is hurt by people who want a house more than they want the woman who lives in it. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, I will talk to you later, Mom. He did not call me for 3 weeks. It was during those 3 weeks that the discovery happened. The discovery that changed everything. The chapels were still operating under the day-to-day management of a man Theo had hired in 2010 named Tomas Reyes. Tomas was the accountant who handled the books for all 3 locations. He had been with Whitfield Memorial for 15 years. He was a quiet, careful man in his late 40s, with reading glasses he kept on a cord around his neck. I had taken to going into the Bellingham office 2 days a week. Tomas would walk me through the books. I had been a bookkeeper in my 20s, and the work came back to me more easily than I had expected. On a Thursday in early June, Tomas knocked on the door of the back office where I was working. Eleanor. Do you have a moment? Of course. Come in. He closed the door behind him. He sat down. He took off his reading glasses and laid them on the desk. Before we find out what happened next in the story, I want to take a brief moment to speak directly to anyone watching who might be going through their own sudden, overwhelming transition. If you are navigating a bitter divorce, the loss of a spouse, or a financial shock, you know the hardest part isn't just the money, it's not knowing what to do first. That is exactly why we created the Phoenix Blueprint. It is a practical, step-by-step guide for starting over. It doesn't have fluffy affirmations or vision boards. It is a tactical survival manual. It gives you the exact checklist for the first 48 hours, including the one rule you must follow: do not make any decision you cannot reverse. It includes the Found Money worksheet, showing you exactly how to check state databases, because 1 in 7 Americans actually has unclaimed money waiting for them right now. It even gives you word-for-word boundary scripts to use when family members pressure you for money or try to make decisions for you. You can get the entire guide right now for just $17. If you're watching on your TV, just pull out your phone, open your camera, and scan the QR code on the screen right now. If you're on a computer or phone, click the top link in the description. You don't have to figure this out alone. Now, let's get back to the story. Eleanor, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to know that I am asking it because I have been loyal to this family for 15 years. Has Daniel been making inquiries about the financial structure of the business? I felt my stomach drop. Inquiries. What do you mean? Tomas pulled out a folder. Inside it were 3 letters, on letterhead from a Seattle accounting firm I had never heard of. These came to my office. Requests for documentation. Detailed inquiries about the value of each chapel, the cash flow, the property assessments, the equipment inventory. The letters are signed by an accountant named Marshall Greaves. He claims to be representing your son in an estate planning capacity. My son did not tell me about this. No. He did not. The first letter is dated 4 months ago. The most recent is dated last week. I looked at the dates. The first letter had come the week before Brielle had first asked me, over dinner, whether I had thought about simplification. The second had come the week before Daniel had asked me to put the Bellingham house in his name. They had been gathering information for months. Building a picture. Calculating exactly what they were going after. Tomas. Do you have any idea who Marshall Greaves is? I made some calls, Eleanor. Marshall Greaves is not just an estate planning accountant. He works specifically with high net worth divorces. He helps clients structure asset valuations in anticipation of marital dissolutions. He is known for it. Divorces. Yes. I sat back in my chair. The room was very quiet. Are you telling me that my son has been preparing for a divorce? From Brielle. And he has been hiding it from me. Tomas hesitated. He picked up his glasses. He set them down again. Eleanor. I think it is more complicated than that. I have been doing some additional research. Quietly. Because I felt I owed it to you, and to Theodore. He pulled out a second folder. This is what I found out about Brielle. He slid it across the desk. The first page was a marriage license. Issued by Pierce County, Washington, dated August of 2018. Between a man named Marcus Wendell Caro and a woman named Brielle Ann Sutherland. I looked up. She was married before. Yes. Daniel told me she had not been. I do not know what Daniel was told, Eleanor. But this license exists. I pulled it from the public record. And I have not been able to find a divorce decree. Not in Pierce County. Not in King County. Not in any of the surrounding counties. I had a paralegal friend run a more thorough search across multiple states. There is no record, anywhere, of a dissolution of the marriage between Brielle Ann Sutherland and Marcus Wendell Caro. You are saying? I am saying that, as far as the public record indicates, Brielle was still legally married to another man when she married your son. I could not speak. I sat there with the folder in my hands, and I stared at that marriage license, and I felt the bottom of the world drop out from under me. Tomas. Is it possible there was a divorce that was not properly recorded? It is possible. But unlikely. And there is one more thing. I had my friend pull credit and address records for Marcus Caro. He lives in Olympia. He is alive. He is 41 years old. He works as a logistics manager for the state government. And his current marital status, on every database my friend was able to access, is listed as married. To Brielle. To Brielle. I closed the folder. My hands were shaking. I sat in that back office at Whitfield Memorial Services for a long time. Tomas waited with me. He did not speak. He understood, the way only a man who had worked beside Theo for 15 years could have understood, that what I needed in that moment was silence. Finally I said, Tomas. Why are you telling me this? Why are you bringing me this? Because Theodore was my friend, Eleanor. He was the best man I ever worked for. He protected the families who came through these chapels with everything he had. I am not going to stand by and watch his widow walked into a corner. That is not who he hired me to be. I reached across the desk. I took his hand. I held it for a moment. Thank you. I drove home that evening through the soft gold of a Bellingham June. The light was long on the water of the bay. I went home. I sat down at the kitchen table. I took the locket out of the drawer in my vanity and brought it down with me. Theo. Our boy is being used. And I think he does not even know it yet. And I do not know what to do. The kettle ticked on the stove. The cedar tree outside the window did what it always did. She had not married my son. She had purchased a position. She had married a man with a wealthy widowed mother, and she had stayed legally married to her first husband as a hedge, in case the position did not pay off the way she hoped. I sat in the cooling kitchen for a long time. I thought about what Theo would have done. He would have built the wall. He had already built the wall. He had built it 10 years ago, in a lawyer's office, with a pen and a paragraph that no one else had read until I needed it. I made a decision. The next morning, at 8 o'clock, I sat across from Wendell Calloway and I told him I wanted to activate the protection clause. The full one. The irrevocable freeze. I wanted every asset Theodore had left me locked under a trust structure that I myself could not undo. Calloway looked at me carefully. You understand what this means, Eleanor? I do. You understand that once we do this, Daniel cannot access any of it. Not a dollar. Not the house. Not a chapel. Not until your death, and only then under the terms Theodore originally specified. I understand. And if he asks you to undo it, you cannot. Even if you change your mind. I will not change my mind. All right. Tell me what brought you here. I told him. Everything Tomas had found. The marriage license. The missing divorce. The accounting firm that specialized in high net worth divorce strategy. The pattern of inquiries dating back 4 months. Calloway listened. When I finished, he sat for a long time without speaking. Then he said, very quietly, Eleanor. Your husband knew exactly what he was doing. I have practiced law for 46 years. I have never seen a man read his own son more accurately than Theodore read Daniel. I am going to draw the papers up today. You can come in tomorrow morning and sign them. There is one more thing I want to do. Tell me. Theo left something for me. Years ago. A video. He told me about it once, in passing. He told me it was in the safe deposit box at the Industrial Credit Union, in the white envelope, and that I would know when to watch it. I have never watched it. I have not been ready. Calloway nodded slowly. Watch it, Eleanor. I think you are ready now. I drove from his office directly to the credit union. The young woman at the counter walked me back to the vault. I sat in the small private room with the box on the table in front of me, and I lifted the lid, and inside, beneath the deeds and the policies and the marriage certificate from 1981, was a white envelope. Sealed. Theo's handwriting on the front. For Eleanor. When you need it. Inside was a small flash drive on a keychain, and a folded note. The note said, L. If you are watching this, something has come up that you needed to face alone. I wanted you to face it with me. I love you. Press play. I put the drive into Theo's old laptop at home. The video opened. There he was, sitting in the front parlor of our house, in the chair he always sat in the blue cardigan I had given him for his 60th birthday. He looked directly into the camera. He smiled. That slow Theo smile. Hi, Elle. Well. If you are watching this, it is for one of 2 reasons. Either I have done something stupid and I am not coming home, or someone is trying to take advantage of the fact that I am not coming home. Either way, I want you to know something. He took a breath. You are the strongest woman I have ever known. You have always been. You just have not always known it. You spent 40 years pouring yourself into me and into Daniel, and somewhere along the way, you started to think your worth was measured in how much of yourself you could give to other people. It is not, Elle. Your worth is yours. It was yours before you met me. It will be yours after I am gone. He paused. His eyes were wet. I have built a wall around you. The estate is structured the way it is because I have spent 40 years watching what money does to people, what death does to people, what time does to children, and I know things you would not let yourself see when our boy was young. He is not bad, Elle. He is just not finished. He is going to take a few more decades to finish becoming who he is going to be, and during that time he is going to be vulnerable to people who will see him for who he is not yet. Not who he is. Who he is not yet. He smiled. Do not let anyone take down the wall I built for you. Not Daniel. Not yourself. If someone is leaning hard on you to give them what I left you, the answer is no. Trust the answer. Trust me. I would not have built it if I did not think you might need it. He leaned closer to the camera. And one more thing, Elle. The locket. The one I gave you the day we got married. You always thought the photo in there was just of me. It is. But underneath the photo, behind the backing, is a folded slip of paper. Take it out. Read it. It is something I wrote for you in 1981 that I never gave you, because I was 26 and I did not have the words yet. I have them now. I love you, Elle. Be the woman you have always been. Press stop. The video ended. I went upstairs. I sat at the vanity. I opened the locket very carefully. I lifted the small oval photograph of Theo with the chapel key. Behind it, underneath the silver backing, was a tiny folded slip of yellowing paper. I unfolded it. His handwriting in soft pencil. From 1981. Elle. If you are ever alone in a room and you cannot remember who you are, look at this and remember. You are the woman who told me that pie at the diner on the highway was no good. You are the woman who is not afraid to tell me the truth. Stay that woman. No matter who marries you. No matter who you marry. Stay that woman. Always. I cried. Sitting at that vanity, with the locket open in my palm and 44 years of marriage compressed into one folded slip of pencil writing, I cried for the woman who had been clear-eyed and direct and unapologetic at 23 years old. I had been losing her for a long time. I had been giving her away, piece by piece. I was going to bring her back. I signed the protection papers in Calloway's office the next morning. Every asset Theodore had left me was now sealed inside a trust one could not undo. Frozen until my death. I felt something I had not felt in 3 years. I felt sure. I waited 3 days. I did not call Daniel. He did not call me. The silence between us was a held breath, on both sides. On the 4th day, he called me at 7 in the evening. Mom. We need to talk. In person. Brielle and I both think it is time. Can you come down to the house on Wednesday for dinner? I can. 7 o'clock. We will have something light. Brielle will make her chicken thing. All right. I will be there. I knew what was waiting for me at that dinner. I knew the way an animal knows there is something in the brush. They were going to bring out the documents again. They were going to ask me, in a more practiced and more pressured way, to undo what Theo had built. They had no idea, yet, that I had already activated the freeze. They had no idea I had seen Tomas's folder. They had no idea I had watched Theo's video. They thought they were walking into a negotiation. They were walking into something else. I chose my dress carefully on Wednesday morning. A simple navy wool. Theo's favorite. I put on the locket. I drove the 2 hours to Sammamish in the long late light of June, and I parked in the driveway of the house I had paid for the down payment on, and I rang the doorbell. Brielle opened the door. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere set. Her hair was newly highlighted. She smiled the smile she had been smiling at me for 2 years. Mrs. Whitfield. Come in. Daniel is in the kitchen. I just put Ivy down. I came in. I took off my shoes. The floors were as cold and white as I remembered. Brielle's parents were on the couch. Both of them. The 2 pharmacists from Tacoma. They had not been mentioned. They stood up when I came in. Eleanor. So nice to see you again. Catherine. Howard. I had met them twice in 3 years. Once at the wedding. Once at Ivy's baptism, where they had stood at the front of the church with Daniel and Brielle, and I had been seated in the 2nd row. Daniel came out of the kitchen carrying a glass of white wine for Brielle and a glass of water for himself. He kissed me on the cheek. Mom. Thank you for coming. Sit, sit. I sat in the armchair near the window. Brielle's father cleared his throat. Eleanor. Brielle and Daniel have asked us to be here for what they hope will be a productive family conversation. We are all on the same side here. We all want what is best for this family. For our children. For our granddaughter. Our granddaughter. The way he said it stopped me. As though Ivy had two sets of equal grandparents, both of us hovering over her crib in equal measure. As though I had not been kept on the outside of every room she had ever slept in. Howard. I am here to listen. Brielle leaned forward. Mrs. Whitfield. We have been concerned. All of us. About some of the decisions you have been making with the estate. About the resistance you have shown to some really standard, smart, modern financial planning. And we think it is time to have a real conversation about whether you are in a place, emotionally, to be making these kinds of decisions on your own. I did not move. I did not speak. She continued. You are a widow. You have been a widow for 3 years. You live alone in a very large house. You spend a lot of time at the funeral chapels, which is, frankly, a very depressing environment for someone in your stage of grief. You have isolated yourself from your son and your granddaughter, who would love to be more involved in your life if you would let them. And you have refused, repeatedly, to make the simple, sensible legal arrangements that any responsible person in your position would make. Brielle. Please let me finish, Mrs. Whitfield. I am not trying to be unkind. I am trying to be honest. We are worried that you are not in a clear emotional place to make decisions of this magnitude. And we think it is time to consider whether some of these responsibilities should be transferred to Daniel. For your sake. Not for ours. Brielle's mother nodded. Brielle's father nodded. Daniel looked at the floor. Daniel, I said. Look at me. He looked up. Slowly. Is this what you think, Daniel? Is this what you wanted to say to me? Mom. I just think they have some valid points. I think we have all been worried. I think you are alone in that house and you are getting older and you are stubborn and you are making decisions that are not what Dad would have wanted. What Dad would have wanted. Yes. I sat very still. Daniel. Your father set up the estate exactly the way it is right now. He did not want the house in your name during my lifetime. He did not want the chapels in your name during my lifetime. He did not want any of it in your name during my lifetime. He told his attorney, in writing, that he wanted to protect me from exactly this kind of pressure. From you. He named you. Specifically. Years before he died. Daniel paled. Brielle interjected, smoothly, the way a salesperson interjects when a client is starting to read the fine print. Mrs. Whitfield. What Theodore wanted in 2018 may not be what he would have wanted now, with a granddaughter in the picture, with the family in a different stage. Things change. Brielle. I would like to ask you a question. Of course. Are you currently married to a man named Marcus Caro? The room went silent. I have never in my life seen a face change the way Brielle's face changed. The cream-colored cashmere of her sweater did not move. Her posture did not move. But something behind her eyes, something I had felt watching me for 2 years from behind that careful smile, retreated. It went very far back, very fast, like an animal disappearing into a burrow. I beg your pardon. You heard me. Marcus Wendell Caro. 41 years old. Lives in Olympia. Works for the state government. I have a copy of your marriage license. It was issued in Pierce County in August of 2018. I have looked for the divorce decree. There does not appear to be one. Catherine Sutherland, on the couch, made a small sound in her throat. Brielle's father said, Eleanor. I do not know what you think you have, but you have made some kind of mistake. I reached into my purse. I took out the folder Tomas had given me. I set it on the coffee table. It is not a mistake, Howard. The documents are public record. I had them pulled. Your daughter married a man named Marcus Caro in 2018, and as far as the public record indicates, she is still married to him. Which means that, as of today, her marriage to my son is not legally valid. It is what is called bigamy. Which is, last I checked, a felony in the state of Washington. Daniel had gone the color of paper. He turned slowly toward his wife. Brielle. She did not look at him. Daniel, I can explain. Brielle. It is not what it sounds like. You told me you had never been married. Daniel, I will explain everything. Not in front of her. Not in front of your mother. You told me, when I asked you, before I proposed, you told me you had never been married. You looked me in the eye, Brielle. You looked me in the eye. I watched my son. I watched 2 years of his life shifting under his feet like a dock unmoored from its pilings. I watched the boy I had raised remember, in a single second, the lesson his father had tried to teach him at 7 years old. That you do not get to choose who comes through your door. But you choose how you send them home. He stood up. Mom. I am sorry. I am sorry, I am sorry, I am sorry. I did not know. Brielle stood up too. Her composure was fraying now. A muscle in her jaw. A flick of her hand toward her hair. Daniel. Sit down. Please. Mrs. Whitfield is using out-of-context information to manipulate you. This is exactly what she does. She uses money and information to control you. I have been telling you this for 2 years. Brielle. Did you marry Marcus Caro? Daniel, please. Did you marry Marcus Caro? A long pause. I did. Yes. But Daniel, we separated, we were going to file, he was supposed to file, I did not know it had not been finalized. He was looking at me. He was not looking at her. Mom. Mom, I am so sorry. I do not know what to do. Brielle's father stood up. His face was red. Eleanor. This is highly inappropriate. To bring this into a discussion about estate planning is vindictive. It is cruel. You have always resented Brielle, and now you have weaponized. Howard. Sit down. I am not finished. The room went silent again. I turned to Brielle. Brielle. I want you to hear what I am about to say very clearly. 3 days ago I signed papers in my attorney's office activating an irrevocable freeze on every asset Theodore left me. The house. The chapels. The land. The accounts. All of it. Locked. Sealed. Untouchable. Not by my son, not by you, not by me. Daniel will inherit nothing until I die, and not a day before. And after I die, depending on the legal status of your marriage at that time, what he inherits may or may not be considered marital property, but I trust him to figure that out with a good attorney by then. Brielle's mouth opened slightly. You did what? I activated the freeze, Brielle. The wall my husband built around me. The wall you have been very patiently trying to take down for the last 2 years. It is now permanent. You cannot do that. Daniel is your son. Ivy is your granddaughter. And nothing I just said changes either of those facts. She turned toward Daniel. Daniel. Say something. He did not say anything. Daniel. Tell her she cannot do this. Tell her this is not how families work. Tell her. He looked at the floor. I stood up. I picked up my purse. Catherine. Howard. I will see myself out. Brielle stepped in front of me. Her composure was gone now. Her face was red. Her hand was clenched around the stem of her wine glass so hard I thought it would break. Eleanor. You are not going to walk out of this house. You sit down. You sit down right now. You are going to apologize to me. You are going to apologize to my parents. You have insulted me in my own home, and you are not leaving this house until you have made it right. I looked at her. I looked past her at Daniel. He was still looking at the floor. Mom, he said. His voice was small. The voice of an 8-year-old. Mom. Brielle is right. You came in here. You said terrible things. In front of her parents. You owe her, you owe us, you owe. He could not finish. He looked up at me. His face was wet. Mom. Apologize to my wife. Or get out of my house. There it was. The line. The line I had heard in my head, the way you hear a door closing, ever since the lunch in my own dining room 3 years ago when she had walked through my house and called it quaint. I looked at him. My son. The boy I had carried in my body for 9 months and rocked in the dark and bandaged when he fell off his bicycle and held when his father died. The boy who had once climbed onto a chapel counter at 7 years old and listened to his father teach him the names of flowers. I felt no anger. I had used all my anger in the last 3 years, drop by drop, and there was none left. I felt something quieter than anger. I felt the kind of clarity a woman feels only 2 or 3 times in her life, when she sees, all at once, the exact shape of the choice in front of her. I turned to Brielle. I stopped in front of her. I said 3 words. He's your problem. I walked past her. I picked up my coat. I opened the door. I stepped out onto the porch. I walked down the path to my Volvo in the cool June dusk, with the rhododendrons blooming in their planters and the light still long over the lake, and I got in, and I closed the door, and I put the key in the ignition. I drove home. I did not cry in the car. I drove the 2 hours back to Bellingham with the radio off, and I did not look in the rearview mirror, and I did not slow down. I went home. I unlocked my own front door. I went inside. I put my purse on the side table where Theo's photograph stood. I looked at his picture. It is done, Theo. It is done. I went upstairs. I took off the navy wool dress. I hung it carefully in the closet. I put on my nightgown. I sat at the vanity. I opened the locket. I read the note from 1981 one more time. You are the woman who told me that pie at the diner on the highway was no good. Stay that woman. Always. I put the locket back in the drawer. I got into bed. I lay there in the dark for a long time. The cedar tree moved outside the window. The house was quiet the way it had been quiet for 3 years, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was a quiet I had chosen. Not a quiet that had been done to me. I slept. And I dreamed of Theo. We were in the front parlor of the chapel on Forest Street, the first one, the one with the dove gray curtains I had sewn myself. He was sitting in his old leather chair. He looked up at me from his ledger. He smiled. You did good, Al. I did what you asked, Theo. I did not pull down the wall. You did better than that. You added your own brick to it. I am proud of you. I still ask myself if I did the right thing that night. And you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed and apologized, or would you have walked out that door? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes we need to know we are not alone in the most difficult decisions. The first week after the dinner was hard. Daniel did not call. I did not call him. I knew what was happening in that house in Sammamish, the way you know a storm is happening at sea even when you cannot see the rain. There was no way to know how he was sorting through the wreckage of what Brielle had told him she could explain. I had to leave him to it. I cleaned the house from top to bottom that week. I took everything out of Theo's closet. I donated half of it to a men's shelter on Northwest Avenue. I kept his shirts. I kept his wedding band, which he had stopped wearing the year his fingers had started to swell. I kept his blue cardigan from the video. I washed the dove gray curtains he had hung in the front parlor in 1987 and rehung them. I waxed the kitchen table by hand. I dug up the dead rosemary in the herb bed and planted new lavender. I did not call Daniel. I let him sit in the consequences of his own choices. That was one of the hardest things I have ever done as a mother, and the only thing harder would have been picking up the phone. I joined a grief group at the public library. Wednesdays at 4 in the afternoon. I had walked past the flyer for it 3 years in a row without stopping. That second Wednesday after the dinner, I drove down to the library, parked under the alders behind the building, and walked into the small carpeted meeting room with 7 other widows and 1 widower already settled in folding chairs around a coffee urn. I sat down. I introduced myself. I said the words I had not said out loud to anyone yet. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. My husband died 3 years ago. I am just now beginning to be alive again. A woman across the circle from me, maybe 10 years older than I was, with a soft white braid down one shoulder and a navy cardigan over a flannel shirt, smiled at me. That is exactly the right week to start coming, dear. I am Rosalind. Rosalind and I had coffee that next Wednesday after the meeting. And the Wednesday after that. She had lost her husband 9 years before, a logger out of concrete. She had 3 grown children. The middle one, she told me, she did not speak to anymore, by the middle one's choice, after a similar incident over money and a fishing cabin on the Skagit. Eleanor. There is a thing nobody warns you about when you are a young mother. They tell you all the things that will be hard about raising a child. They never tell you the hardest part. The hardest part is letting the adult version of that child face the consequences of who they have become. Especially if it means they are not going to talk to you for a while. Especially if it means they may never come back. That is the hardest part. And it is what motherhood eventually requires of every single one of us, in one form or another. Rosalind. Does it get easier? It gets clearer. That is not the same thing. I drove home from that coffee with the windows down and the smell of cut hay coming off the fields past Linden. I had not driven with the windows down since Theo died. I had not noticed the way June smelled in this valley. I had been forgetting things like that for 3 years. In the second week, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer. But I did. Eleanor. Howard. It took me a second to place the voice. Brielle's father. The pharmacist. From the night of the dinner. I am calling to apologize. I did not say anything. Eleanor. I had no idea. About Marcus Caro. I had no idea Brielle had been married before. She told us in 2019, when she met Daniel, that she had been in a long-term relationship that had ended. She never said the word married. I should have asked. I am her father. I should have asked. You should have. I want you to know. Catherine and I have been talking to her this week. We have hired her an attorney. The marriage to Marcus, it turns out, is not exactly what your investigator described. There was a separation in 2017. There were filings that were started and never completed, because of a procedural error in the original petition. The point is, she is married, legally. The marriage to Daniel is not valid. She has been advised by counsel to file for annulment from Daniel and to complete the dissolution from Marcus, which she should have done 7 years ago. What about Ivy? Ivy is Daniel's daughter. Annulment does not change paternity. Brielle is also going to have to face some legal exposure for the perjury on her marriage license. We are not, Catherine and I are not going to shield her from that. She is 29 years old. She made these choices. Howard. Why are you telling me all this? Because I owe you the truth, Eleanor. And because I want you to know that my granddaughter is going to need her other grandmother in her life. Whatever happens with the legal situation, however Daniel and Brielle work it out or do not work it out, Ivy is going to need you. Brielle has agreed. We have asked her to agree. She has agreed. I sat down at the kitchen table. The kettle was on. The cedar tree outside the window had a small bird in it that I had been watching for several minutes. Howard. Tell Catherine I appreciate the call. I will be ready to be a grandmother whenever you need me to be. Thank you, Eleanor. I am sorry. For all of it. I have been a poor judge of my own daughter for a long time, and I am only now beginning to understand what that has cost everyone around her. Howard. You are doing the right thing now. That counts for something. We hung up. I cried at the kitchen table. Not for Daniel. Not for Brielle. For Ivy. For a 14-month-old baby who was going to grow up inside the wreckage of decisions that had nothing to do with her, and who was going to need every grandmother she could get. Daniel called me on the third week after the dinner. It was a Friday night. It was raining hard, the kind of vertical Pacific Northwest rain that turns the streetlights into smeared yellow circles. Mom. Can I come over? Daniel. Mom. Please. I have been driving for 2 hours. I am at the gas station on Lakeway. Please. Come. He arrived 10 minutes later. I opened the door. He was soaked. He had not brought a coat. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His eyes were red. He stood on the porch in the rain. He did not come in. He looked at me through the screen of the open door and his face broke, slowly, the way a face breaks when a man has been holding something in for too long. He sank down on the porch boards. On his knees. The rain still falling on him. Mom. Mom, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I did not say anything. I came out onto the porch in my house slippers. I sat down next to him on the wet boards. I put my arm around his shoulders. We sat like that for a long minute, my son and I, soaked through, in the cold rain, on the porch of the house his father had said we would grow old in. Come inside, Daniel. You will catch pneumonia. I helped him out of his wet shoes in the front hallway. I led him into the kitchen. I put the kettle on. I gave him one of Theo's old flannel shirts from the closet to put over his soaked clothes. He sat at the kitchen table. He held the tea I made him with both hands. He cried for almost an hour, on and off, in waves. I sat across from him. I did not interrupt. I had learned, from 40 years of being married to a funeral director, that there is a kind of grief that needs to be sat with, not spoken into. Finally, he wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked at me. Mom. I do not know who I have been for the last 2 years. I know, son. I let her. I let her do all of it. The money. The way she talked to you. The way she shut you out from Ivy. I told myself it was just adjustment. I told myself it was just personality. I told myself you were too sensitive. I let her tell me you were too sensitive. I know, son. And the worst part is, I knew. I knew on some level. Every time I asked you for money, I knew. Every time she said something about you in front of me and I did not push back, I knew. I am 36 years old, Mom. I am 36. And I let her turn me into a man my father would not have recognized. I have been so. I have been so. He could not find the word. You have been ashamed, son. The word is ashamed. He nodded. He cried again. I let him. When his breathing settled, I poured him more tea. I sat down across from him. Daniel. I want to tell you what I am going to do, and what I am not going to do. Listen carefully. Okay. I am not going to undo what your father built. The protections are permanent. I cannot reverse them even if I wanted to. That part is over. You will inherit what your father and I built, after I am gone, and not before. That has not changed and it will not change. He nodded. I am not going to pay for the annulment. I am not going to pay for your divorce. I am not going to pay for your attorney. I am not going to call the credit card companies. I am not going to talk to your boss. I am not going to send rent money if you and Brielle have to sell the Sammamish house. You are 36 years old. You make $170,000 a year at your job. You will figure it out. He looked at me with red eyes. Okay. Mom. I understand. I want to be very clear about something else. I am not going to rescue you. I have rescued you enough. $80,000 for a wedding. $150,000 for a down payment. $50,000 spread across 2 years of bathrooms and closets and air purifiers. $280,000 I gave you, son. I gave it because I was afraid that if I said no, I would lose you. And I lost you anyway. So I am done buying my way into a place at your table. From here on, if you want me at your table, you will have to want me there because of who I am, not because of what I am paying for. Mom. I am not finished, Daniel. The other thing I want to tell you is this. I am going to see Ivy. I have spoken with Brielle's parents. They are going to help arrange visitation. I do not know what your marriage is going to look like in 6 months or a year, but Ivy is my granddaughter, and I am going to be in her life. Not because Brielle gives me permission. Because Ivy needs her grandmother. That part is non-negotiable. Are we clear? We are clear. Now. The last thing I want to tell you. And this is the hardest thing. I took a breath. You are going to lose things, son. Probably a lot of things. Your job may survive this. The house may not. The marriage is already over, whether you both want to admit it tonight or not, because there was never a marriage. You are going to be in a small apartment by Christmas. You are going to be paying child support. You are going to be sitting across from a custody mediator. And I am going to watch you go through that, and I am not going to step in. I am going to let you fail in the ways you need to fail in order to become the man your father was already convinced you could be. He was crying again. Quietly. And the reason I am going to do that is because love that rescues is not love. It is theft. It steals the chance for a person to become who they were meant to become. A love that asks you to make yourself smaller is not love, and a love that keeps another person small is no better. Your father taught me both of those things, slowly, over 40 years. I learned the first one the night I walked out of your house. I am only just now learning the second one. I am not going to forget either of them. He nodded. He could not speak. I reached across the table. I took his hand. Daniel. You are still my son. You will always be my son. There is nothing you can do that will make me stop loving you. But I love you too much to be the woman who carries you. You are going to have to carry yourself for a while. He held my hand. I am going to try, Mom. That is all I am asking. He stayed in the guest room that night. The same room he had slept in as a boy. I made him pancakes in the morning. He did not eat much. He hugged me for a long time at the door before he drove back south. That was the start of what came next. The consequences cascade was not dramatic. It was slow. The annulment was filed by Brielle's attorney in early July. The bigamy charges were not pursued, in the end, due to a complication with the original divorce filing from 2017 that her attorney was able to argue had created enough ambiguity that the prosecution decided not to proceed. She paid a fine. She kept her job. She did not lose custody of Ivy, but she did not get sole custody either. The arrangement was 50-50. The Sammamish house was put on the market in August. It sold in October, for less than they had bought it for, after fees. Daniel walked away with very little. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a building near his office. Brielle moved back to Tacoma to live near her parents. The wedding photographs disappeared from her social media accounts. She remarried, I heard later, 18 months after the annulment, to a real estate agent in Bellevue. I do not know how she explained the gap in her marital history to him. I do not particularly care. Daniel's job survived. Barely. His company put him on a 6-month performance plan after the messy publicity of the annulment. He passed it. He kept his position. He took a pay cut in the process, voluntarily, Because he asked to step out of the regional manager role and into a smaller territory while he sorted his life out. He paid child support every month. He showed up to every custody handoff. He learned to put Ivy's hair in the small pigtail she liked, and to make her macaroni the way she preferred it, with butter and no cheese. He called me every Sunday. Not because I asked him to. Because he decided to. The chapels kept running. I went into the Bellingham office 4 days a week now, instead of 3. I learned the parts of the business Theo had handled, ledger by ledger, contract by contract. Tomas taught me. I leaned on him without apology. He never made me feel I was bothering him. When the Mount Vernon location needed a new director in February, I sat in on the interviews myself. I hired a young woman named Constance Park, who had worked at her family's funeral home in Tacoma since she was 19, and who had Theo's quality, that quality of walking beside grief without trying to manage it. I saw Ivy every other weekend. We had Saturdays together. I drove down to Daniel's apartment to pick her up, and we drove back to Bellingham, and she spent the night in the guest room in a small toddler bed I had bought for her, with a small white nightlight shaped like a sheep. I read her the same picture books I had read Daniel. I taught her to feed the chickadees off the back porch from a small plastic cup of seeds. She called me Nana. Just Nana. The name the youngest children give to the most important people, with a sound that comes from before words. I went back to the grief group on Wednesdays. Rosalind and I became close friends. We took a trip to Victoria in the spring, the two of us, by ferry, with overnight bags and a hotel reservation and no obligations to anyone but ourselves. We walked the inner harbor at dusk and ate fish and chips out of paper baskets and talked about our husbands as though they might walk up behind us at any moment. I started writing. Not anything formal. A journal. I wrote about Theo. About the chapel. About the women I had sat with in that front parlor with the dove-gray curtains, the widows whose hands I had held, the mothers who had buried children, the husbands who had buried wives. I wrote about my own grief, slowly, year by year, in the order I could finally bear to face it. One Saturday in late June of this year, almost a year after the dinner in Sammamish, Daniel came to the house. He brought Ivy. He had been spending more weekends with me when his custody schedule allowed. He had been quieter. Steadier. He had not been the same person since that rainy night at the kitchen table, but he had been recovering a version of himself I had not seen since he was 20. We were sitting on the back porch. Ivy was asleep on a blanket on the grass under the cedar tree. The chickadees were at the feeder. Daniel was drinking iced tea. He said, "Mom, I want to tell you something." "Tell me." "I have been thinking about whether to leave the logistics company. I have been thinking about whether I want to come back. To the chapels. To Dad's work." I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on Ivy. "What made you start thinking about that, son?" "Last month I went to a funeral. A coworker's father. They used a chain. One of the big corporate ones. The whole service felt like a transaction. The kind of service Dad used to talk about when he came home angry from a competitor's chapel. I sat in that pew, Mom, and I thought, my father knew how to do this. My father knew how to send a person home. And I am his son. And I have been pushing pallets and load schedules for 15 years, and I do not know how to do what he did, but I want to learn." I felt my throat tighten. "It would take time, Daniel. You would have to start at the bottom. Constance is running Mount Vernon. Brian is running Anacortes. Tomas is running the books. You would not get to come back as a manager. You would have to come back as an apprentice." "I know. You would have to learn to be in the prep room. You said you hated the smell when you were 20. I am 37 now. I have learned to live with worse smells." I laughed. I had not laughed in front of him in over a year. It startled both of us. Ivy stirred on her blanket. A small smile crossed her sleeping face. "All right, son. Talk to Constance. Talk to Tomas. If they think you can do it, we will see. I will. He looked out at Ivy on the grass. He smiled. Dad would be glad, Mom. If he could see all this. He would be glad. He sees it, Daniel. Wherever he is. He sees it. I want to tell you the last thing. Last Sunday, I drove out to the cemetery in Linden where Theo is buried. I had not been in almost 6 months. I parked under the maple tree he is buried beneath. I walked across the wet grass with a small bouquet of yellow rhododendrons from my own garden. I sat down on the cold ground in front of his stone. I told him everything. I told him about Daniel. About Ivy. About Brielle, and the annulment, and the small apartment, and the macaroni without cheese. I told him about Constance at the Mount Vernon Chapel and the way she had a touch with bereaved families I had only ever seen in him. I told him about Rosalind and the trip to Victoria. I told him about the journal I had been keeping. I told him that Daniel was thinking about coming home. To the work. To his father's work. I took the locket out from under my collar. I opened it. I read the note from 1981 to him, out loud, so he could hear his own handwriting in his own voice. You did good, Theo. You built a wall. I added a brick. We did it together, in the end. I closed the locket. I sat there a long time. The light moved through the maple. A robin came down 2 stones over and looked at me sideways. The wind moved the high grass at the edge of the cemetery. Somewhere across the field, a dog was barking, far away, and a tractor was running. I did not bury the locket. I want to tell you that, because some women in stories like this one bury the keepsake at the end, and I understand the impulse. But the locket is not a weight to me. It is not a chain. It is the woman I was at 23 years old in a diner on a highway, telling a stranger his pie was no good. I will wear it for the rest of my life. When the day comes that I lay it down, it will be because I am laying everything down. Not because I am ready to forget. But because I am ready to rest. If you have been listening this far, I want you to know something. There may be a moment coming in your own life, or there may already have been one, when someone you love asks you to be smaller than you are. When they ask you to apologize for a thing you did not do. When they ask you to hand over what someone else built for you to protect. When they stand across a dinner table from you and tell you to choose between being loved and being respected. I cannot tell you what to choose. I only know what I chose. A love that asks you to make yourself smaller is not love. It is a slow theft. And theft is theft, no matter how soft the voice that asks for it. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk out the door. You are allowed to be the woman in the diner who told the truth about the pie. Stay that woman. No matter who marries you. No matter who you marry. No matter how much it costs. I love you. Wherever you are tonight. Whoever is asking you to apologize for something that was never your fault. I love you. And I am proud of you, even though I have never met you. Because I know what it took for you to listen all the way to the end of this story. Write me your city in the comments. Tell me your name. I want to know who you are. I want to know I am not alone in this. I want you to know you are not alone in it either. You have never been alone. And the woman in the mirror, the one you are afraid to look at because you do not recognize her anymore, she is still in there. She is just waiting for you to call her by her old name. Call her. She is waiting. Good night, my friend. And until next time. Stories like this remind us that starting over is terrifying, but it is always possible. If you or someone you love is facing a total reset right now, whether from a divorce, a loss, or a financial disaster, you need a plan. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link below to get the Phoenix Blueprint for just $17. It gives you the exact steps you need to take in the first 48 hours, and a 90-day plan to get your independence back. Thank you for watching.